Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Belgium once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are actually a very famous brewery and blendery, one that I've been meaning to get around to reviewing something from for a wee while, but you know, as always happens with doing these reviews, there are some things that just pass you by. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a sub-style that I very much enjoy. It's one that I do need to review a little bit more of on the channel, so we'll see about making that happen. And it's also from a category of beer that I've only really kind of gotten into over the last 2 or 3 years. And I credit one of my subscribers for that, Chris Contreras, who used to live and work in Brussels in Belgium. So a big thank you to him for kind of opening my eyes to this category of beer. But I've heard very good things about this one. I found it in one of my local Systembolagets here in Sweden, and I just kind of thought, you know, bugger it, why not? Let's get a review from this brewery up here on the channel. So very much looking forward to trying this one. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching this one enjoy my take on it. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Oud Beersel, which is just to the south of Brussels, the Belgian capital, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer from Oud Beersel. So I will apologise in advance if any of my Flemish Dutch or Wallonian French pronunciations are not quite right, but yeah, I'm just not overly familiar with Dutch or French as languages. But this particular beer is the Oude Kriek Vieille. It comes in at 6% ABV, and as the name tells you, this one is a lambic kriek, which is essentially a cherry lambic beer. So yeah, we've only reviewed 1 or 2 beers from this particular category on the channel before, but this is one of 3, I believe, that Oud Beersel produced themselves. So we will need to see about reviewing the other ones on the channel at some point in the future. But definitely cool to introduce this brewery to you here on the channel, and so I think we should crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Oud Beersel. This is the very first time I'm reviewing one of their beers on the channel, as I mentioned, but definitely not the last. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Belgian playlist along with a number of other things, and that is of course being added to whenever I get the opportunity. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Oud Beersel. So, Oud Beersel, as I've mentioned to you already, are a lambic brewery based in Beersel to the south of Brussels, the Belgian capital, and the history of this brewery can be traced back to the late 19th century and to the Hofmann and van der Velden families. So the Hofmanns ran a small village shop with a cafe next door that served house-blended lambics by the litre, whereas Henri van der Velden, or Henry van der Velden, not sure how we should pronounce that, he founded a brewery back in 1882, and one of his sons, Egidius, married the Hofmann's daughter, which married the cafe and the brewery together for several generations. But Henry had previously worked for Brouwerij de Kroon in Ukle, and this was during the cold months of the year, but he also worked as a fruit picker during the warmer months, and it was his experience with the Kroon that taught him the art of brewing lambic beers, and so he decided to go for it and make his own business. But the company passed down the generations through Henry's son Egidius, who upgraded the family farm and built a new brewery in 1922, although this wasn't a traditional lambic brewery, produced kind of sweetened lambic-esque beers apparently, but his younger brother Pierre continued to run their father's brewing and blending business until just after the Second World War. But Egidius died in 1953, at which time the company passed on to his son Henry II. So Henry studied at the Institut National d'Industrie de Fermentation, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but basically the National Institute for the Fermentation Industry. in Belgium, but he graduated in 1948, and so he was ready to take over immediately, and he first expanded the brewery to 50 hectolitre capacity and named the beer Oud Beersel for the first time, apparently because he wanted to distinguish it from what he called the new Brussels beers, and I guess that would be meaning the other lambics. But he also established a lambic museum on site in 1973, which became very well respected, and the brewery became known over the years as one of the first to stop sweetening their lambic beers with saccharin, and they continued to bottle their lambic beers by hand until 1988, when they outsourced their bottling to Boone. But Henry's nephew, Danny Traps, took over the brewery in 1991 because Henry's son wasn't really interested in taking over the family business, but it went through some really hard times and closed in 2002, and this was really a period when the whole lambic industry was in decline. But initially they outsourced, under Danny, they outsourced the brewing to Boone, but Danny actually found a new job and then decided to close Oud Beersel for good, meaning that Henry was kind of scrambling to find a new successor. A few years later though, the brewery was revived by Gert Christians and Roland de Bruce, who were young brewers and basically interested in resurrecting the Oud Beersel Kriek and Vieille. But to finance the relaunch of the brewery, they actually contract brewed 2 beers under the label Beersalis, which was the middle-aged name for Beersel. And these were produced at the Vieille brewery, who of course do the Delirium beers in Melle. But Robert left the company in 2007, leaving it to Gert, and today the lambic wort is produced at Boone based on specifications from the Van der Velden family before being transported to Oud Beersel for barrelling. So basically Oud Beersel is only a blendery, it's not technically a brewery these days. But in 2015 they added new 60 and 120 hectolitre fodders to the renovated loft in the building, and then in 2017 they bought some land behind the brewery and planted 320 Scherbecks, the cherry trees, which gave their first harvest in 2020. But sadly Henry van der Velden died in 2018 at the age of 91, and I think it was in 2017 as well that they actually renovated the old cafe and reopened it as a kind of bottle, they renovated the old cafe and reopened it as a tap room or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, you can actually go to Beersel and try the beers on site in the original cafe that is associated with Oud Beersel. But these days, Beersel are producing Kriek, Framboise, and lots of different types of Vieille. I think in total they've got about 15 or so beers that they produce very regularly actually. But yeah, that is everything that I can really tell you about Oud Beersel for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. And of course I think there are things in there for all the different vintages as well. But yeah, as I say, that's it for your history section of Oud Beersel. So I hope that made sense, and I do hope that my Dutch and French pronunciations weren't too bad in this video. As I say, that's something I do need to work on a little bit. But yeah, there we go. So I'll just have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see the old church in Beersel there, which is quite nice. This is a 375ml bottle, incidentally. You can see on the back that it has the this one is the sort of European, oh I thought it's basically for products that are territorially protected on the part of the European Union. But there you can see Oude Kriek Vieille, and then you've got that nice kind of top on this one, and you can also see there's a specialised Oud Beersel thing in there as well. But like I said to you earlier, this one is a 6% Kriek. It's a cherry lambic beer essentially, and these can be very, very interesting. But they've got quite a few different Krieks from what I remember. It was 3 or 4 that they had listed on the website. I bought this one in the Bangatan, the Bangatan Systembolaget here in Lund, and I think it was 70 kroner that this one cost me, which is pretty decent. I'm not sure how much you would actually pay for these beers in Belgium, but I don't think that would be too much more. Actually, maybe another euro or two, but I'm quite happy to pay that for a lambic beer, especially an import one. So yeah, we'll get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Definitely cool to review my first beer from Oud Beersel here on the channel. If you're watching from Sweden and you go to the Hansa Systembolaget, they do actually have a good selection of different lambic things that I'd recommend you have a wee look at. But let's open this one up and see what we get. There we are. Nice little bit of smoke on the opening there. Not sure how well you guys can see that, but definitely a wee bit of CO2 just in the bottle there. But let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. And you can see straight away it looks absolutely lovely. There we are. Not too much in the way of sediment at the bottom of this bottle. I'll need to check for a bottling date actually in a second, but we can see just before the head disappears on this one, it's poured with about a 2/3, 3/4 finger of a frothy, kind of foamy pinkish head there. A mix of kind of big bubbles at the, kind of medium-sized bubbles at the bottom, some foamier ones further up, and it does look very, very nice, as I said. But yeah, this beer certainly does look part of a Belgian Kriek. It says it's best before the 9th of the 11th, 2041. So I'm guessing this one might have been bottled in 2021, actually. So we'll make an educated guess at that there. So yeah, anyway, other than the head on this one, you can see there's 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass at the bottom, a few little bubbles going up toward the bottom of the head there, which has incidentally faded away to just be a very thin foamy layer. Then you've got that nice kind of thicker ring around the edge of the glass there. But in terms of the colour of this beer, it's absolutely as you would expect from a Kriek. It's very close in terms of colour to what you see on the label here. If we shine the light through this one, it's got that lovely kind of dark chestnutty burgundy type colour to it. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts you put into the beer will of course affect that as well. And when it comes to the Krieks, you do often, you really do have to care about that, because the cherries are going to give the beer a lot of colour. And you can see quite a variance in the colour of these beers depending on what type of cherries are used, actually. So yeah, it is really cool. The lambics are very cool because they are very often very, very local products actually. And Boone, of course, with their new kind of cherry orchard that they have, will be extremely local actually. But yeah, a little bit of kind of natural haze to this one. But yeah, if we shine the light directly through it, it does look very, very nice actually. A lovely looking beer, this one, but pretty much what you would expect in terms of appearance from a Belgian Kriek. So yeah, let's have a wee look at this one then and just see what it's all about. Oh yeah, aroma-wise, this is very, very nice. Now, one of the things for me with lambic beers is that quite often I find you get a lot more complexity out of the actual flavour than you do the aroma. And one thing that I've always mentioned with, or always felt with sour beers, for me a good sour beer is one that comes in and gives you a good little bit of punch, but then just mellows out really nicely. And you very often find that with these traditional lambic beers actually. So let's just have a wee look at what this one is actually going to have in store for us. So yeah, lots of kind of lovely wet juicy cherries of course, which is what you'd expect, but we'll break the beer down and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So of course, the backbone of the beer, you can smell that lovely kind of slightly drier European oaky quality coming out of this one. There's definitely a wee bit of a vanilla to within the kind of woody character of this beer, which I really, really do enjoy. So for me, yeah, lovely kind of smooth, oaky vanilla notes coming out of this one. It's the wood has a little bit of dryness to it, but as I say, it's very, very smooth, and you start to get little elements of vanilla and almost like a kind of butterscotchy, butter candy quality coming out of the wood. But on top of that, you certainly do get a little bit of like a kind of wholemeal brown bready bread crust, a little bit of a kind of straight up brown bready character in this one. Yeah, it's kind of like a sweet as I say, like a really kind of sweet brown bready character. And it is, yeah, quite light and homely. It's not like a kind of darker rye bread or anything like that. Yeah, the way that that goes together is pretty damn special, actually. I really have to say that about this beer. It is very, very nicely done. Yeah. Aroma-wise, the bready character in this one really is nice. Like I say, a little bit of kind of fresh wholemeal brown bready bread crust, some soft, fluffy wholemeal brown bread on top of that. Then you've got a little bit of like, there is a little bit of an almost very slightly toasty biscuit or something like that, but I do get quite a little bit of like Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy character coming out of this beer. So I do like that about this one, I have to say. Now, the beer, of course, does have a good mix of kind of fruity and hoppy characteristics to it, but one thing you need to remember about lambic beers and sour beers in general, it's always interesting to ask the blenders or brewers of these beers exactly what mentality they adopt when it comes to hopping these beers. Because when it comes to sour beers, if you put fresh hops in them, it always distracts a little bit from the sourness. Likewise, if you add fruit into the beer, as an adjunct, you're always going to suppress a little bit of that the hoppy bitterness in any case. So yeah, the way that everything goes together in this one, I think, is really very, very nice. So you have to find that kind of balance in these beers, but you can definitely get a little bit of a kind of hoppy character out of this one. There's a wee touch of earthiness in there. There's a little bit of herbal character for sure. Then you've also got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity coming out of this one. But the floral aromaticity is quite smooth, and you can feel from the aroma that a lot of the kind of hoppy characteristics within this beer have dropped out of it. That's quite obvious to see. So yeah, a little touch of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character, wee bit of a wetter floral aromaticity, and you've also got some nice kind of wet, grassy characters in there from the hops as well. But yeah, obviously the longer that you leave this beer to sit, the more of that green component of the beer is going to drop out. And of course, the more woodiness and more mellow characteristics you're going to get out of this beer. But you can drink these, to be honest, at any point, and you will get a good quality beer. So that's worth bearing in mind when it comes to drinking the lambics. It's really up to you if you want to experiment with them and just see how they last and things like this. But yeah, the hoppy character in this one is quite obvious, but it just adds a little bit more depth into the beer, I would say. The fruity side of things on this one for me is quite interesting, because I often associate cherries with having this really deep and very distinctive fruitiness, and of course you do get that in this beer, but there are a few other things going on with this one. Like, you definitely get a little bit of a kind of almost figgy character out of it. You get some nice plums and stuff like this, but of course the overwhelming majority of the fruity character in this one is cherry. So you can smell the juicy cherry characters at the front of the nose and in the top of the nose, but as I say, you've got a lovely kind of juicy figgy character to it as well, and for me quite a bit of juicy plum. But this is of course placebo. This is just my interpretation of it, so make of that what you will. But yeah, I do think the way that everything kind of pieces together in this beer is very, very nice, and the aroma of these lambics is always really interesting. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them, but I think it is about time that we taste this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Oude Kriek Vieille, a 6% Belgian lambic Kriek beer from Oud Beersel in Beersel, just to the south of Brussels in Belgium. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers, Prost, santé. Yeah, that has a hell of an impact to it, but it's very nice. So, yeah, this goes together really, really nicely. actually. I think the it just, you come out with these lambic beers, they are very sharp and very kind of punchy, so if you've not had one of these in a while, it can take your mouth just a wee bit of time to adjust to them. So if you're trying these, I recommend that you always take a few sips and just let your palate kind of first get used to the sourness, and then also to see how the aftertaste kind of mellows out. Because for me, like I say, the thing with these lambic beers, it's always about how the aftertaste mellows out and what it shows you within that aftertaste. But yeah, that is very, very nice actually. So, yeah, middle third of your palate in this beer. The backbone is obviously that lovely kind of smooth, oaky backbone there. Because it's European oak, I find you do get a little bit more dryness out of it, particularly the further into the aftertaste that you go. But like I say, I think it is very, very nice. I would also say that on top of the woody character in this one, further forward on that middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of you absolutely get a little touch of vanilla coming out of it. There's also a little bit of a more, yeah, so you've got a nice little bit of kind of oily vanilla in there. You've got a little touch of kind of nutty character coming out from the wood as well, and a little bit of Werther's Original butter candy type thing. So yeah, you can feel the woodiness coming out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go, absolutely. But within that middle third of your palate, for sure, above that you get the nice kind of wholemeal brown bready bread crust, absolutely. So yeah, lovely mix of wholemeal brown bready bread crust in this one, which I really do like. Above that, you do get the above that you absolutely have more of a kind of like an almost fluffier kind of brown bready sort of thing there. It is a little bit kind of grainy and woody actually, but yeah, I think describing it as wholemeal brown bread is absolutely right. And yeah, that goes together nicely. It does get drier, you get more and more of the breadiness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go as well. So yeah, for me, the kind of above the brown bready character, you start to get some of the sweeter aspects out of this beer. So yeah, above the kind of brown bready character, there's a little bit of a kind of leathery, there's a sort of leathery kind of brown sugary layer in there, and that does get drier, and you get a wee bit more sweetness out of that the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, I really do like how that pieces together in this one, definitely. So yeah, a little bit of leathery brown sugar there. Then above that, you get a little circle in the middle third of your palate where there's a touch of like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing coming out of this one. So that goes together really quite well. Above that, you get a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity character coming out of the beer, and that lingers into the aftertaste too. So yeah, you get the thing. What you'll find is that in the middle third of your palate, these kind of flavours evolve, and they're what you really get in the aftertaste. But in the beginning, you're getting the juicier, fruitier, sharper kind of things coming out of this one, which I really do like. But yeah, in terms of the the middle third of your palate, I think we said everything we really need to with this one. So let's go to the back third of your palate. And as I've often said on the channel, when it comes to the back third of your palate, you get similar flavours on the back third to what you do in the middle third of your palate, but they just kind of come out in different intensities, really. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is pretty nice. But yeah, on the back third of your palate, you can feel quite often that the general trend with these beers is that the more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter flavours come out further forward. So yeah, you get that nice kind of dry, you can feel that the woody character in the base is a lot drier. Then the kind of almost like brown sugary character, the sort of Werther's Original butter candy thing that sits on top of the wood, is a lot drier as well. Then you get the kind of wholemeal brown bready bread crust layer, and then you get a more fluffy and airy. You do get a more kind of fluffy and airy brown bready character coming out of this one, which is nice. And then you get a little bit of the leathery layer from the middle third of your palate, just kind of creeping across the back into the back third of that palate. And above everything else, you get a more kind of farmhousey and woody bready character on this one. It's kind of wrapped in honeycomb a little bit. I always get honeycomb on the back third of the palate for some reason, but definitely, yeah, the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way this beer goes together is really nice, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, let's go on to the hoppy side of the beer then. So like I said to you, the hoppy side of a lambic beer is not the most prominent side of things, because the hoppy character can often detract a little bit from the kind of lambic sour side of the beer, if you like. But let's have a wee look at that then. And the back corners of the palate, you absolutely get a little bit of a kind of smooth earthiness there, and as you move further forward, you get a wee touch of herbal character. So yeah, a little touch of herbal character in this one. Then as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you've got a little bit more kind of floral aromaticity out of this one, which is nice. But yeah, as I say, the floral aromaticity isn't too prominent, to be honest with you, but it is definitely there. Round the front curve of the palate, you've got a little bit of a lighter grassiness coming out of this one, and yeah, that goes together really, really nicely. Yeah, I like that about this beer for sure. Yeah, interesting stuff. So on the I think that covers everything we need to say about the green component. And obviously, as I said, the longer that you age this beer, the more the hoppy component will drop out of it. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the kind of front third of your palate then, and the actual fruity, sour side of the beer. So yeah, the base of the front third of your palate then, on that border region between front and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in this one. You can feel it's a mix of white bread and brown bread actually, but the base of that front third of your palate, you absolutely have a little bit of the kind of smooth and slightly dry European oak. You've got a little touch of the brown sugar, then you've got a bit of wholemeal brown bread, and above that you get the cherry notes coming out of the beer. For me though, there is a slight layer of a kind of oily, almost figgy type layer, which will be from the hoppy component of the beer. But when it comes to the fruity adjunct, or the cherries added into the beer, you can definitely pick up what's going on there. So the thing you'll always get in these sour beers is what I would call impact flavour, and that comes in right behind the very front tip of your tongue. So yeah, you've got that kind of sharp impact. You've got that kind of sharp impact from the cherries just behind the very front tip of your tongue when it comes in. So it comes in, gives you that big kind of sour hit, and then it gives you all of the, as I say, it gives you all the other kind of characteristics which are really interesting. So it kind of mellows out, so you get that sharp kind of this punch from the beer, then it mellows out and you feel the juicier cherries. It gives you this little bit of an almost plummy and kind of datey, not datey, kind of plummy and pruny flavour further back on the palate. But of course this is all cherry, and the cherry flavour that comes out of this it's quite a bright cherry. I don't find this one too oily or too dark compared to some others, but like I say, it goes together really, really well. So it gets a thumbs up from me for sure. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Flavour wise, this beer goes about its business very, very nicely, and it gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think that covers everything we really need to say about the actual flavour of this beer. But it's actually one of the more mellow and drier lambics that I can think of that I've had in recent times. But that said, it has been a wee while since I've had like a proper lambic beer, come to think of it. But still very, very nicely done, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, so I think we can finish off with the mouthfeel of this one. For me, the overall mouthfeel on this beer is it's kind of, overall I'd say it's kind of bottom end to the midpoint of mid-bodied. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a real smoothness and dryness to it, this beer actually, which is quite interesting. In terms of IBUs, I think technically speaking this beer will only be like 5 IBUs or something like that. So I would stick with that, yeah, 5 to 10 IBUs. It does have a wee bit of dryness there and a bit of bitterness, of course. But the malt base, like we said, you've got the woody character underneath. You've got the kind of smoother and kind of grainier bready notes in there, and a little bit of sweetness on top. Then you've got that lovely kind of sharp cherry character on top, which comes in and really mellows out and becomes very, very juicy the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. I've really enjoyed this one, and I'm glad that I picked it up. I was just kind of surprised at how cheap it was, to be honest with you, when I saw it in Systembolaget. But yeah, this one is the Oude Kriek Vieille, a 6% Belgian lambic creek beer from Oud Beersel in Beersel, just to the south of Brussels in Belgium. Really cool to cover this brewery on the channel for the first time, and we will see about reviewing more of their beers at some point in the future when we get the chance. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Oud Beersel as well. Do give me some other lambic recommendations that you would recommend to check out as well. In that I include some of the kind of new wave stuff that's going on in the US. There's some very good sour beer breweries over there these days. But yeah, if you do get the chance to try some lambics, I highly recommend that you do. But just be aware, they do take a wee bit of time to get used to. So I thank Chris Contreras once again for opening my eyes and getting me to try a few lambic things. But yeah, until the next time, slàinte, skål, cheers, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out Oud Beersel's social media, and I'll see you guys in another review very, very shortly. Slàinte, skål, cheers, prost, santé. Make sure you have a little look at the Oude Kriek Vieille from Oud Beersel.